I still have the property in Flagstaff, Coyote Path. We're going to split it 4 ways. And the last I talked to Kody, he says he doesn't have his part of the money to pay off the property. I have my part, and it's just sitting there. It's really up to Mary, Robin, Kody, and I to pay it off. Kody was an amazing father. He was a totally engaged father.
I think it's harder for some siblings than others.
Wow, it sounds like Sister Wives star Kody Brown and Robin Brown are really embracing the YOLO approach to finance. A $2.1 million home, with $1.68 million of that financed, right as Kody hits 55. Bold move, and the cherry on top? They went through a trust linked to a brand new Nevada LLC, courtesy of the same attorney who handled Mary's divorce. Because nothing says financial confidence quite like a complicated legal web, right? And let's talk about those infamous lots. They're just sitting there while Kody secures yet another mortgage instead of selling them to help with the down payment. Makes you wonder if he's actually banking on that property or if they just love throwing money around. Retirement plan? Who needs one when you're living in the moment? Also, what's with the money discrepancies? The other wives are supposedly scraping by, while Kody's piling up real estate and debt. So much for an even playing field. If this is Kody's way of ensuring Robin's future, it's an interesting choice. We've got so much to dive into today, so let's not waste any time. Let's jump straight into it. Hey everyone, what's up? It's Elena here, and welcome back to my channel Reality Nexus X. Alright, here's my potentially ban-worthy take on Sister Wives star Mary Brown and Leon. Because honestly, I have no one else who even watches this show. I think people were way too harsh on Mary for her initial reaction when Leon came out as gay. For one thing, she was raised in a strict religion that flat-out condemns homosexuality. No amount of exposure to the outside world magically rewrites decades of deep-seated beliefs. If she'd outright rejected Leon, that'd be another story, no excuse for that. But all she did was take a minute to process, ask a few questions, and maybe not be all rainbows and singing Kumbaya from the get-go. Plus, Mary has spent her life being authored within the family. She's the infertile one, the first wife, and now she's the one with the only kid who's come out as gay. In her religious context, it's complicated, especially when you're already marginalized for having only one child, a daughter, no less, who's automatically less than in the family's eyes. So for Mary, this news wasn't just another okay, cool moment. It was yet another reason for Kody to look at her sideways. Now, here's where I'll probably get the most heat. Mary needed a second to grieve the life she'd envisioned for her then-daughter. She had one kid, no male heir to offer Kody, and she probably invested a lot in the idea of a traditional wedding where she'd get a son-in-law. For years, she's watched Kody play dad with other wives' children, and that had to sting. So letting go of her ideas about her daughter's future wasn't something she could just flip off overnight. In the end, she fully supported Leon, but I think her moment of shock was understandable. She's not my favorite person, but the hate she got for that was honestly unfair. And don't even get me started on Robin. Sure, it's easy for her to look like the queen of acceptance. It's not her child. She might get all this praise for her support. But does anyone really think she'd be that gracious at home if it were her kid? Especially if, like Mary, she only had one. I doubt it. One of my kids went through a journey with both gender and sexuality. When she told me she felt like a boy, I was supportive, but yeah, there was a part of me that mourned the daughter I thought I had. Several years later, after mental health support and joining her school's GSA, she's come to terms with her female identity and discovered she's pansexual. And thanks Zeus, I didn't have a reality TV crew capturing my every facial expression because I'm sure I messed up along the way. I'm an atheist from NYC with left-leaning views, so I was way more prepared than someone like Mary, who grew up in a conservative religious bubble in Utah. Mary, honestly, has all my grace here. From what we've seen on social media, she's fully accepting of Leon and Audrey. Most of us are just trying to figure out life, and thankfully, we don't have cameras rolling for our every misstep. I've never had a problem with Mary's reaction. I don't think she was out of line, and I've never understood the backlash. She was just quiet, holding Leon's hand when allowed and processing. She knew that one wrong word could shatter her relationship with Leon, and it must have stung that Liam didn't tell her first. Another blow to an already fragile relationship. And yes, she needed a moment to grieve. You can be supportive of your child being gay, but when that child has spent their life dreaming of sister wives and kids, and you've envisioned bio-grandkids in your future, you're going to need a minute. Oh, and while we're on it, Kody? People give him credit, but listen to what he actually says. It's my job to love. It's God's job to judge. Translation: he's convinced Leon, and now Gwen by extension, are in for a rough ride come Judgment Day. However, dear everyone wondering if the wives can get back the money they gave towards someone else's house. They can't. It doesn't work that way. Seriously, listen up. When you apply for a mortgage, the lender goes through your finances like you're a high-ranking mobster. Every cent you didn't earn from a paycheck needs to be accounted for. To qualify, you need to show your own money, not funds from anyone else. Any money used for a down payment has to be a gift, no strings attached, meaning whoever gives it has to write a letter stating it's a gift, with no expectation of repayment, zero liability, full stop. And let's be real, there isn't a court in the country that would look at a signed letter clearly stating gift, no payback needed, and decide otherwise. Now, maybe the home profits went into, and then out of, the group LLC. If Kody withdrew more than his fair share, say, over 1, 5 or 2, 5, without written consent, that might give the wives grounds for repayment. Or if the down payments were made before the look-back period for gift letters, then sure, no letters would be needed. But otherwise, gift letters mean no legal payback is owed. Also, while Robin's claim that the house was meant as a family asset might sound good, at best it would be shaky support in court, maybe as part of an informal verbal agreement among the wives. Additionally, that moment was genuinely chilling. In the latest episode, when Kody's talking about his relationship with Miri, he just morphs into this rage-fueled Hulk and growls, "Whatever I did was never enough." Like, what was that? It didn't even sound human. I replayed it 100 times to see if they edited his voice or added some filter, but nope, it looks like he actually forced his voice into that demon-like tone. Completely unhinged. He's got this intense, almost terrifying fury toward anyone who doesn't worship him or stroke his god complex. It's clear that Mary's refusal to just fall in line has always grated on him. He knew her long before they married, and she's never been one to let his bad behavior slide. While the others may have gone along to get along, Miri held him accountable, and he hated that. He's furious that she's now leaving and telling her truth, shattering his control over the narrative. Remember when she hinted she wasn't going to toe the line anymore? And Kody's response was to say he'd kept her around out of fear of what she'd do. Like, what does he think she's capable of? Mary doesn't strike me as the violent type at all. He's just terrified that she'll keep exposing his behavior. At this point, he's either really leaning into being the show's villain, or he's unraveling in a way that makes me question whether it's ethical for us to be entertained by it. Also, Sister Wives star Christine Brown's son-in-law Tony Padron's comment about being addicted to gambling and drugs struck me as oddly specific. He was trying to compliment David for navigating the loss of his wife without succumbing to addiction, but why jump straight to those two? Wouldn't it make more sense to mention something like not falling into depression or grief instead? Does anyone else think this was a subtle jab at how Kody handled the deaths of his brother and father, or am I reading way too much into it? Honestly, it felt like a weird remark, much like his earlier comment about David being like Kody. It seems like Tony relishes saying things just to stir the pot. he really gives off an icky vibe. And let's not forget when he said drugs, and my Kelty jumped in to correct him with drinking. It's like he doesn't even think before he speaks. While some folks might overanalyze his words, I'm in the camp that thinks he just says bizarre things without any real depth behind them. Maybe it's as simple as David sharing his story and Tony trying to draw comparisons to those who turn to addictions in grief. Who knows? Personally, I don't think there's anything juicy or sinister there, just more of Tony being, well, Tony. Additionally, Sister Wives star Robin Brown being stuck with a man no one wants is honestly the perfect ending to her story arc. I don't think she's genuinely upset because her dream of a big, happy, blended family crumbled. No, I think she's devastated because she can't torment the other wives anymore. She relished being the favorite, having her kids come first, and making everyone else feel lesser. Now, with everyone walking away, she's left with nothing but an irritable, rejected husband and no one to feel superior to. The best part? No one's fighting or begging. They just left. Nothing infuriates someone like her more than nobody wanting what she has. The Christmas tears? Not about missing family unity. It's because she can't hold her perfect family over Mary's head anymore. Mary's done and couldn't care less. Robin's lost the power, the control, and now she's spiraling almost as hard as Kody. Couldn't happen to a better pair. And the early days, he was smitten from day one while she seemed thrilled to have someone to finally take care of her. I'd bet anything she loved the idea of being on the show and envisioned herself as the young hot wife while the olds quietly faded away. But now she's been typecast as the villain for ages, and she knows it. When she says she's unhappy, I actually believe it, but not for any reason she claims publicly. I also think she had this drive to build a complete family to somehow make up for the broken structure she had in her own childhood. But instead of healing, she's recreated her own chaos for her kids. At least she never had to get a job out of it, so silver lining. Plus, I just finished this week's episode, and one thing really stood out during Christine's conversations with her kids. They all felt things were moving way too fast with her and David. While I get that sentiment, I think they're missing a key point. When you hit your 50s, your relationship timeline shifts drastically. You become acutely aware that time is limited, which often leads to a greater willingness to take a leap of faith. Both Christine and David know exactly what they want in a partner. David from his previous happy marriage and Christine after realizing what Kody wasn't. Christine even mentioned making a list of qualities she wanted in a partner after marrying Kody, and Kody didn't fit any of them. Honestly, I think they have a solid shot at a long-term relationship. That said, if all her kids were over 18 and out of the house, I'd be more inclined to agree. But Truly is still living at home, and it typically takes time to really know someone. As a mother, I would need longer to feel confident that a new partner is a safe person for my child. I'm not saying David is unsafe, but I can't wrap my head around why Christine trusts him with Truly so soon. This also ties back to her upbringing, where quick marriages are the norm, and men are generally seen as protectors rather than potential threats. This perspective can lead to the troubling dynamics we've seen in families, often resulting in abuse. To be honest, it feels reckless to move so quickly, especially when her kids have already been traumatized by one man. I'm not buying the "at this age, you know what you want" narrative. Christine is coming from a background of a single long-term relationship and, let's face it, some questionable programming. Her actions seem more like those of a teenager than a responsible mother. I don't understand why so many people feel the need to justify her choices. Upon rewatching, she appears selfish and immature, especially considering the implications for her kids. So there was Kody Brown, waltzing over to Sister Wives star Mary Brown's house with the grand plan of playing checkers and crowning himself king. Little did he know, Mary had other, far more strategic games in mind. She was deep into a game of chess, poised for a queen's victory. In mere moments, she made it painfully clear how little she cared about him anymore, declared the Mexes, and chopped off any future paths together. Honestly, I wasn't the only one cheering her on at that moment. The look on Kody's face when he realized she wasn't budging was worth every moment of those 18 seasons. I was practically counting down to her freedom during their 20th anniversary dinner, where Kody strutted around in all his misogynistic glory, completely disregarding Mary's emotional well-being. He treated her like livestock, as if she had no right to express her feelings. Honestly, I'm so proud of her. It's important to remember that Mary escaped both a cult and an abusive relationship. Watching Kody's strategy shift during their conversation was wild. He kicked things off with aggression, blaming her for the divorce and calling her unlovable. Apparently, it was all her fault for getting a release and embarrassing him in front of the church. But once he realized he had no power over her anymore, his tactics changed. Suddenly, he tried to lure her back in with kindness. Spoiler alert, it didn't work. Mary had grown far beyond his grasp, and it was hilarious to see him flounder, utterly confused by his lack of control. I recently rewatched some episodes and noticed how indifferent Kody had been toward Mary in the years leading up to their move to Flagstaff. But oh boy, the moment he started trying to convince the wives to relocate, he was all sunshine and rainbows with Mary. You could practically smell the manipulation in the air. He dangled just enough hope for their relationship in front of her to coax her into investing in Coyote Pass and his dreams with Robin. It was downright diabolical. Kody walked in there, expecting to put Mary in her place. Little did he know, she'd found her place all on her own, embracing it and standing firm in her newfound glory. It was nothing short of perfection. She willingly played his games for over a decade, only to emerge with poor mental health as a souvenir. In the later seasons, she looked like the shell of her former self. But now, I am 100% here for confident Mary. When the show finally wraps up, it's going to be glorious. The OG3 will look back at their beginnings and see just how much better off they are now. They're actively working on loving themselves, growing, and becoming the best versions of themselves. Meanwhile, Kody and Robin will be left with just each other and a pile of overpriced, bizarre art. Instead of doing the hard work on themselves, they'll stew in their own misery and keep pointing fingers at one another. Misery loves company, and it seems they're the perfect soulmates. I wouldn't be surprised if Kody either recorded that conversation or was on a phone call with Robin the entire time, letting her listen in. This was one of the first solo chats they've had in years without Robin present, and I can only imagine she was losing her mind, not knowing what was unfolding. Seriously, can we talk about Sister Wives star Kody Brown's so-called brush with death from coronavirus? I can't stand how he spins this dramatic tale. He claimed he had a brush with the Reaper, but let's be real, he only experienced flu-like symptoms. I'm currently watching season 19, and from what I can tell, he never even got hospitalized. Talk about a 10, 10 for drama, and a solid 0, 10 for actual queen behavior. I mean, come on, he's acting like he had a near-death experience when all he faced was a mild illness. That's not even a fever. If he saw any kind of figure, it wasn't the Grim Reaper. It was probably just Robin in her robe, looking confused. And let's not forget that ridiculous scene where he's sitting in the hospital parking lot with Robin, acting as if they were both on the brink of death. Please, he definitely pulled the classic man-sick routine. Didn't one of the original wives mention that whenever Kody got sick, it was like the apocalypse was upon them? I can totally believe he thought he was going to die, especially since he wasn't near Robin during his crisis. Moreover, I'm currently watching the episode where Aspen gets married, and wow, Kody really outed himself. When he and Mitch walked into the groom's cottage and Kody said, "Don't touch the sacred bed," followed by that giggle? Just cringeworthy. I can't pinpoint why it hit me so hard, but it was seriously yuck. And that giggle at the end? He looked like a prepubescent child who just discovered his sense of humor. I completely agree. Yuck. It feels like Mitch is just putting up with Kody for Aspen's sake. And honestly, Aspen seems like she's had enough of Kody too. Who could blame her? Mitch is such a more solid guy than Kody could ever hope to be. But let's take a moment to unpack the fact that Kody was super excited about his daughter getting railed later that night on the very bed he was so worried about. Is it just me, or does that feel off? And what about that other gem when he told Caleb's dad how lucky Caleb was to get to plow Maddie later? Honestly, it's like choosing between two cringeworthy moments. Totally a toss-up. Not to mention his bizarre comments about jonesing to make out with Janelle while his whole family was falling apart. Kody's behavior at all his kids' weddings was appalling. He tried so hard to steal the spotlight at every single one, which is just another glaring example of his narcissism. I wouldn't be surprised if that comment about the bed made Mitch incredibly uncomfortable too. And can you imagine how Aspen felt watching that? Those poor kids really got the short end of the stick when it comes to having a decent father. So I'm watching episode 5 of the current season, and Sister Wives star Janelle Brown actually claims that Kody was a totally engaged father with her kids, even through their high school years. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but in a polygamist family, Kody is already stretched thin, juggling time between multiple wives and their children. So what exactly does Janelle mean by engaged father? Dropping by on assigned nights and wrestling with the boys? Maybe sitting around watching TV while scrolling on his phone, probably texting Robin. It's interesting to note that Janelle has hinted at her own father being absent in her life. Could it be that her standards for what constitutes good parenting are so low that Kody qualifies as engaged just for doing the bare minimum? Like, sure, he'll show up for sports events, but is that really engagement? I'd also get the sense that Kody had a preference for Janelle's kids because they were mostly boys. After all, Janelle gave him his firstborn son, which must have been a big deal since Mary couldn't have a baby right away. It seems like his disdain for Christine may have led him to treat her kids differently too. He wouldn't even bother to tuck them in at night. Honestly, it feels like the women in this family have constantly tried to justify Kody's minimal involvement by blaming it on the stresses of polygamy. But in reality, he just comes off as a high-maintenance prick who's used to having women do everything for him, all while he struts around like a peacock, taking credit for the bare minimum. Let me know what you think in the comments. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to my channel. I'll see you in the next video. Take care and much love to you all.